Hi everybody. Today I'm talking with John Tucker, a two-time Ironman triathlete who shifted to a low-carb, high-fat approach to his training for his second Ironman event, and now John is keto for his overall lifestyle. John lives in Australia and enjoys exercising most days with a swim, a bike or a run, or even just walking, and why not? One of his mantras is that he prefers to be a participant rather than a spectator and really just enjoys giving things a go. He started a ketogenic approach to life in September 2014 and has continued low carb and dabbled with carnivore more recently. So today we're going to chat about various aspects of John's lifestyle, as well as his thoughts and reasons for his embarkation into keto, as well as the benefits he continues to see from this lifestyle. Also, I just want to add here that John is not a professional athlete. He has a day job, a desk job, in fact, and really that makes John's experiences around keto and Ironman really even more fascinating. So, John, welcome and thank you so much for agreeing to talk with me today.
Absolute pleasure, Debbie. Thank you so much for having me. It's
Brilliant,
great to
brilliant.
be here.
So, firstly, I know that you're in the UK at the moment. So, how are you finding our wonderful summer? And did you arrive in our short heat wave or did you get here after that?
Unfortunately, it feels like I've brought the Melbourne weather to the UK, and I haven't experienced much at all of good weather here in the summertime in the UK
Oh,
yet. My fingers
no,
are crossed that
absolutely.
it will come. We're here for another 2.5 weeks or so, so maybe 3 weeks.
Brilliant. That's good. That's brilliant. Well, we've all got our fingers crossed for the better weather, believe me.
Indeed.
So first of all, I just want to go into your background a little bit. So tell us a little bit about yourself. So where you grew up and whether anything in your childhood or in the way that you grew up shaped your decisions that you made around nutrition and fitness.
Sure. So, thank you for the question and all of these lovely questions that I'm sure are coming. I grew up predominantly in Australia, Melbourne, Australia, to be sort of more specific. So down south. Um, I was born, interestingly enough, in the UK, but my parents decided to emigrate to Australia when I was about 1 year old. So I didn't know anything about it and have had some time over here since, obviously
Mm,
being here right now. And I've married a lovely British girl who's great. Um, but I guess from a food perspective, I was I guess I grew up in a household that my mother was predominantly the food provider as growing up, and she cooked really wholesome, real food, which was great. And I have generally eaten good food throughout my life. I've had a bit of a health bent or wellness sort of view of life. Most of my life, I've always liked trying to keep fit. But I found that as I was getting older, it was more difficult perhaps to keep weight off or prevent poor food choices from showing up in various areas of lifestyle.
mm.
So
Right. Yeah. Okay.
that's me.
So really, you've maybe considered moving over to keto due to the fact that it maybe helped you around weight loss and that sort of thing, really.
Yeah, I was never really a heavy sort of person, hence trying to keep fit all my life
Mm,
and always being involved in various sports.
mm,
However, I did notice, I guess, when I was sort of getting into the 30s and later in 30s
mm.
that, hey, it's not as easy to shift anymore. I need to do a whole lot
Absolutely.
more activity
Yeah.
and
Right.
it was getting, yeah, quite difficult to make that happen. So I
Yeah.
thought perhaps there's a better way, a better approach.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Sure. Okay, good. So, how long would you say you've been following a keto way of eating now?
I started prior to my second Ironman, and that was in around September 2014. I
Right.
probably thought about it around the August timeframe, but I
Mm,
definitely kicked it off on the 1st of September 2014, and
right.
I essentially started eating a very ketogenic lifestyle and approach from that date, and I had in my mind that it will be until the Ironman, which was
Mm,
March 2015. So
right.
I had about 6 months
Six
worth of,
months.
yeah, of
Yeah.
eating that
Yeah.
way.
And did you try low carb first, or did you go straight into keto?
I eased in slightly, probably for a couple of weeks,
Yeah.
just dropping a number of carbs. So I went to a low carb approach, but I
Yeah.
quickly ventured into a very high fat way
Yeah.
of eating.
Yeah, yeah. So you very kindly sent me through a copy of your account of your second Ironman, and
Yeah,
really thank you so much for that. It's a fantastically detailed and honest account of how tough you found that first Ironman, which was the one in New Zealand in 2010, I believe.
correct.
And so you found that tough, I think, not from the point of view of training, but from the food and nutritional side of things. And so, really, to keep things relevant to your experiences, I'm going to refer to your account during the course of our conversation, if that's okay.
Absolutely, yeah. Feel free to
Okay,
include it if
good.
you'd like
Yeah,
in your show notes and
brilliant,
all
brilliant.
that.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you for that. So I think you and I have both been following Keto Way of Life for at least 10 years now. And I can remember when I first started keto, and back then there was not a lot of information around about really the macros, except eat high fat, very low carb, and moderate protein. And I don't think anybody really knew what moderate protein was.
sure.
Um, and so, what difficulties or frustrations did you come across when finding your place in keto? Given the lack of general information at that time.
Yeah, and I guess I'll preface that with why did I begin eating a ketogenic approach? And it
Yeah.
was really all about the Ironman experience for me. And yes, it was a tough experience in New Zealand, where I found that if, or even during the training for that event, I found that I'd have some stomach issues, some problems with my bowel, all that sort
Mm,
of
wow.
annoyance that can come along
Mm,
when you're trying to push your body in various athletic ways, lots and lots of endurance, exercise, many hours. And so what I found was trying to consume all these gels that everybody talked about, or the protein bars,
mm, mm,
or just copious amounts of food because of the amount of calories we're burning every day was
mm,
pretty tough on my body. And so I thought essentially the Ironman is three disciplines, which is running, cycling, and swimming. And what I found was there are actually four disciplines in an Ironman, and that is the swimming, the biking, the running, and nutrition was number
right.
four. And
Mm,
that was really quite a big important factor. And I
mm,
thought, what if I could eliminate the nutrition side of things
mm,
and just be able to focus on these three sporting disciplines? And
yes.
and so I did a whole lot of research, and of course, yes, back then there wasn't a whole lot, but there were some people around on the internet, and some knowledge out there, also in podcasts and various videos, that
Yeah.
people were outlining how they had eliminated, I guess, this fourth issue of
Mm,
nutrition,
mm,
and had started to take this road of low carb, high fat, or LCHF,
mm, mm,
that was a bit more prevalent in I guess, in literature, rather than ketogenic diet and way
mm,
of living and eating. And so I thought, okay, maybe I'm going to give this a go, where we transition our body from being a sugar burner
mm,
to and carb loaded to a fat burner,
mm,
and people that can effectively utilize the fuel that's already in their own body to
Yes.
fuel them continuously.
Mm.
And there's this analogy of, we fill up our petrol engine in our car, perhaps, and when that gets emptied, we need to continually fill that up because that's how, we would be living. We'd be carb loading, we drain those resources and have to refill that local onboard fuel
Mm.
to continue to do that. Whereas if you're a fat burner, you can consider that you're driving a truck that is full of all of the fuel that's available. So the gas tanker that fills up the petrol stations, and essentially that is your engine, and
Mm.
the way that you get your fuel. And suddenly, if I could do this, in my mind was I'd be able to beat what was a problem area and perhaps have
Mm.
unlimited fuel.
Mm.
And that was part of my journey, I
Yeah.
guess, and
Yeah.
the way I embarked on it.
Yeah, sure. And I think a lot of people either forget or don't realize the fact that, in actual fact, this is how the human beings became so successful at just surviving,
Yes,
back in our ancestral time. Because if we hadn't been able to store, store our fat, which we could then use for our energy, that you know we would have just died. So being able to carry around our stores of energy with us is just a very, very it's just a fantastic way of staying well and keeping alive, really, isn't it?
correct. Yeah, keeping that
Yeah,
energy right up there
absolutely.
without this refueling. Because as
Yes.
you say, back when we were becoming humans and
Mm,
traveling all around the world, the hunter-gatherer type scenario, you may
yes.
have gone without food for a great deal of time.
Mm,
And so, yes, we needed to use something. So I found that we could tap in to our body's stores, and there are
yes.
ample stores, no matter how lean you might be,
Yeah.
that you've got energy that you can utilize.
Mm,
And
mm.
I was
And
really
of course, once
amazed.
the body gets used to burning ketones, it absolutely loves that way of generating its energy, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and it thrives on it. You
Mm,
feel amazing. I know I certainly did, and it
yeah.
was it was transformational.
Yes, yes.
Totally.
So I guess back then that there can't have been many athletes who were making that change over to keto, certainly not doing Ironman anyway. So did you find a pushback from any fellow athletes or just in general about well, how on earth can you even think about attempting something like Ironman when you aren't carb loading?
Yep, yep. There was a lot of skepticism. It wasn't perhaps total pushback of, don't be doing this and
Mm,
get away from that approach. It was,
yeah.
that's not going to work, and you don't, you really don't know what you're up for, what you're
Yes.
doing. And I was more of the mindset and trying to flip the scenario and say, but all you're doing is just this refueling, adding sort of
Mm,
fuel to a fire that is continually dying out. Whereas
mm.
I'm thinking of, what if I don't have that requirement to keep stoking the fire, and I
Mm,
just have energy, almost unlimited energy.
mm,
And for them, that was, no, that's not going to be possible. A lot of other people said, I wish you luck with this whole experimental approach, and that probably only fueled me more than anything,
mm.
because I sort of thrive on, what's possible, and giving things a
Absolutely,
go.
absolutely. And it really sounds like you'd got that mindset change, hadn't you? You'd made that mindset change. And I
Yes.
think that's what people find so difficult. And we are going to come on to the mindset side of things, a little bit later on.
Okay.
So just going back to those sort of making that change over to keto, and how do you find it now? For so from sort of 10 years ago, there wasn't a lot of information out there, and now I feel like there's like so much information. I mean, it must be quite difficult for people who are just starting out now, who just want to make that changeover, because there seems to be so much about keto now, and somebody says one thing and then somebody says something else. And I think it's so important, if somebody wants to make the change, to realize that it's a very individual thing. So it's good to kind of make those little experiments and just try, moving the macros around a little bit. Is that what you found you had to do?
Yeah, so I initially took an approach of, I guess, a traditional ketogenic, almost a medical approach,
Yeah.
where it is a 75 to 85% fat, being the main element of our diet, with about a 15 percent maximum type of protein amount, and then a very small, you know, 5% maximum of carbohydrates.
Yeah.
I tended to take that approach because I didn't really know what to do, where to start, how to do it. I realized that it worked, I guess, like I say, medically.
Mm,
There'd been a lot of studies done that gets you into ketosis very quickly.
mm,
I've probably subsequently learned that when you're doing a vast amount of exercise, you can up the carbohydrates a little bit,
mm,
if needs be. But I found also that I didn't need to do that, and I just began to thrive.
mm,
But I do agree there is a lot of information out there now. At least, I guess from my perspective, a lot of people are talking about reducing carbs. So there's a
mm.
lot, it's even mentioned in television
Yeah.
shows now where I'm dropping the carbs or I'm cutting the carbs. And I
Mm,
just think, okay, some of the perhaps message is getting around, and it's not always clear what people are replacing it with.
mm.
But for me, it's been a whole lot of fat has probably become my source of everything.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, good. And I think really the one message that does seem to be coming through now is getting rid of the ultra processed foods, which I think
totally,
are the really, really terrible, awful things that just really have no place in anyone's proper nutrition, really.
totally. I couldn't agree more.
Mm,
And those highly processed foods and the seed oils, which seem to come
absolutely.
almost part and parcel,
Yes.
hand in hand. They're
Mm,
especially something as simple as a salad dressing, where
yeah.
you just think, okay, this is something I'll add to a salad if I was eating low carb anyway,
Yes, yes.
but it's full of seed oils and it's better to olive oil up effectively.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's full of stuff that our bodies don't recognize as being, well, even food, let
Correct.
alone anything that might be of benefit to us. So, yeah, but it's such a shame nowadays in the supermarkets. It's just that those processed seed oils are just everywhere, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really bad. So just going back to your own experiences with keto, can you sort of talk us through your personal benefits that you noticed from going keto? And so I'm thinking about, a lot of people say better mental clarity, feeling less stressed, whatever it might be. What were your own personal benefits that you noticed?
Yeah. So for me, the first and foremost was an abundant amount of energy. It
Yeah.
was just amazing. So it maybe took about I guess I'd eased into it, as I said. I'd gone a little bit low carb,
Mm,
and I suddenly sort of on the 1st of September 2014 said, "Okay, this is it. I'm just eating a ketogenic diet now." And there was a few days where, hey, it was a little cloudy, perhaps
mm,
a little difficult, a bit of a transition. But then I just had phenomenal amounts of energy, and I feel like I've had that type of energy for that amount of time since 2014. So I'm
Yeah.
almost full 10 years in, and
Mm.
feeling amazing. I
Yeah.
also did get the mental clarity.
Mm.
I found that was writing better messages in emails, articulating things better to people in the business world, and able to just notice things around me that other people perhaps weren't, and it was just
Mm.
this clarity element. Um, I also found that my sense of smell was just amazing. So I guess improved in the fact that I could smell sugar, as an example, across the room, because I was no longer eating, this type
Yes.
of
Yes.
way, and I could smell how
Mm.
sweet something was,
Yes.
and I found that really, really
Mm, mm.
quite.
And I don't know about you, my sense of taste seemed to vastly improve. I mean, I could literally taste almost every element of the food that I was eating. And I remember once, I don't know why it happened, but I sort of tried I don't know, a chicken goujon or something like that. And all I could taste was just chemicals. That's
Right.
literally the only thing that I could taste.
Yeah.
Was this how I couldn't taste chicken or even bread or, anything like that at all. It was just this horrible chemically taste. So
Sure.
yeah, it's strange how it really changes almost everything about us, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. It
And
totally
things,
does.
yeah, a much heightened sense of, well, you experience that heightened sense of smell, and that's so incredible that you could smell that you could smell sugar from, you know, like three people away or something.
Yeah,
Sort of,
yeah,
you could
totally. It was,
sense the
another
difference.
table in a cafe
Yeah.
or a restaurant.
Mm,
I could go, wow,
yeah.
that is
Yeah.
very strong. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Good. Yeah. Brilliant. So, how have you found your general health since going keto? Have you found that you have less colds, or how are you feeling generally?
yeah, so I'm a very well person. I'm super healthy. I don't tend to suffer from any ailments, certainly
Mm,
colds. That rarely happens.
yeah.
I think maybe I've had two colds in these 10 years.
Wow.
Uh, I was unfortunately impacted by
That
contracting
awful guess.
COVID-19. Yes, but I guess we're all sort of get
Yeah.
subject in some
Yeah.
way to that.
Yes.
But the interesting thing about that was I was still ketogenic at the time.
Mm,
Uh, so I'd unfortunately caught the virus the day before, and I'm sure I was probably already sort of coming down with
mm,
COVID-19. I swam the fastest swim I'd ever done
right.
in a pool,
Yeah.
and I was feeling amazing, and
Mm,
unfortunately, I was then feeling a little lousy, but
mm,
it didn't impact me more
yeah.
than maybe 36 hours.
Right. Yeah.
I did have to isolate, but
Yeah.
fortunately at the time I was in a hotel room, and
Yeah.
I just continued to eat really well,
Mm.
and didn't find that it was too much of a drama at all.
I think this is it. I think well, I think looking back on it now, what we can definitely say is for more metabolically healthy people, COVID just never had that impact
Totally.
that it,
Yeah.
unfortunately it has done for people who found themselves to be more metabolically compromised.
Yes. A lot of
So
obese people were really impacted.
yeah, very, very
With
badly
that one, yeah.
impacted. Yeah, definitely.
But my health
So
overall is just
just really
amazing.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just talk us through your typical keto day, just sort of going back to when you first started keto from a food point of view. So what would you have? Were you eating 3 meals a day, and what were your food choices then?
Right. So I guess I need to probably call it out right now that I'm a little bit almost on the spectrum front when it comes to um, looking after my body when I'm training for an Ironman. So I
Right,
give myself this 6-month window.
right.
I start training before that, and I
Mm.
started weighing every single piece of food that went in my mouth. And my goal was to hit those macro numbers of the 75, 15, 5 type of scenario, or 80, 15, 5 would be, our straight 100%.
Mm.
And so I
Mm.
tracked absolutely everything. So I was eating um, lots of coconut oil at the time, lots of avocados, lots of bacon, lots of butter, anything fat that I could get in. I was
Mm.
loving it and tracking it and weighing it.
Mm.
I would eat a fair bit of spinach, a lot of eggs, um, and at times I would have the odd um, chocolate covered macadamia nut. But I would generally eat no more than 2 a day because of the amount of carbohydrate in them.
Yeah, sure.
But the good thing about that was macadamias are very high in fat.
Mm.
So if I give you, I guess, a bit of a meal breakdown,
Yes.
I would still have fruit, but it would generally be berries. So it would be strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, blueberries
Mm. Mm.
type of fruit,
Mm. Mm.
with copious amounts of coconut cream, not coconut milk, but the
Yeah,
highest saturated fat I could get.
sure.
So it would be coconut cream. I would mix that with coconut oil as well, and I would add macadamia nut oil, as well as huge amounts of nuts themselves. That would be like almost a typical breakfast if I was having fruit.
Mm.
That it would be a whole lot of nuts and seeds with some fruit, which are berries only, and then loads and loads of coconut cream, coconut oil, macadamia nut oil, and top it all off with lots and lots of double cream.
Right.
Again, as
Wow.
much saturated fat as possible. And I
Yes.
never bothered about how many calories I was eating.
No.
It was really just about those ratios and getting the amount of fat that I thought I needed to stay in ketosis.
Mm. Mm.
And then, yes, I would have 3 meals a day, generally because I was training. So I thought I probably could benefit from the food. And I would have at dinner, lunch was maybe a bit of this, that, or the other. Sometimes it might be a salad with a lot of olive oil and sour cream with loads of cheese mixed
Mm.
in. And then for dinner, it would be something like salmon with broccoli and butter based, sort of
Mm.
yeah, all over the top. So
Yeah. Okay,
they were my
brilliant.
types
That
of
is,
meals.
yes, that's a lot of fat, definitely. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
very, very fat heavy there. Yes.
yeah.
So, and just coming forward in time now, just to touch on what you're doing more recently. I know that you've moved over to a more carnivore, or you're kind of dabbling with the carnivore side of things, really, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
So, how do you think your food choices have changed over the years? So, from being that very, very high fat with lots of nuts and coconut cream and your coconut oils, how are your food choices now?
So I guess if I'm by myself, so having a week of me time, let's say, and my wife might be somewhere else traveling, I would eat nothing but steak, beef, butter, bacon, and salmon. That's pretty
Right.
much what I would
Yeah.
eat. Uh,
And
other,
do you eat 3 meals a day? Are you still on three
uh,
meals a day, or have
no,
you
it
included
really.
some fasting, intermittent fasting?
Yeah, so and I need to say eggs as well because I eat a lot
Eggs.
of eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just a nutrition pill almost in themselves.
They are a superfood, aren't they, really?
Yeah, yeah, love it. Yeah, three fried this morning already. Uh, but let's move on. Um, The yeah, how am I finding?
Yeah, so, sort of, are you still eating 3 meals a day,
Oh,
or
yes,
have
or am I
you
doing any
doing
fasting? So,
intermittent fasting?
yeah, so I
Mm,
would tend to do a bit of a 16/8 type of window,
yeah. Mm,
but it's not always the case.
mm,
I always tend to exercise first thing in the morning. So I get
right.
out of bed and I'm sort of into exercise straight away.
Yeah.
All I'll do is have a little bit of water, and
Mm,
then I'm out running or cycling or swimming, and I could be doing that maybe for 2 hours. I don't worry about any food. I don't take any nutrition on board at all,
no.
and I will, yeah, perhaps eat at lunchtime. If I then feel like I would like to. Um, I don't religiously, I guess, in some respects, you know, work out which hours I might be fasting. It's really about hunger.
Yes.
And I tend to try and not eat too late in the evening,
Mm,
and just let a bit of digestion happen. And then once again, like I say, maybe not start again until
yeah.
midday the next day.
That's, yeah,
Um,
interesting. So how many hours do you try and leave it between finishing dinner and then going to bed? Do you like to leave, like, X number of hours generally?
Yeah, or either hours or at least, finish eating by around the 6:30 in the evening or 7 o'clock at latest,
Mm,
and that gives me
mm,
a good couple of hours before
yeah.
there's any, time to going to bed.
Yes, yes. And do you ever sort of think about, do you tend to eat more fat at lunch or more protein at dinner? So do you split your macros in any way like that?
Yeah, so one of the reasons I'm starting to dabble more in the carnivore side of things is
Mm,
to increase the protein, but at the same time, Um, I'm trying still, or not deliberately, and I'm certainly not weighing food at the moment because I'm not training for an Ironman.
mm,
But I try and keep the fat very high. So ultimately, it's just no carbs at all.
right.
Unless there's some residual amount in something, but
Mm,
it's
mm,
very little, if any, carbs,
yeah.
um, if I'm eating in that way. And so I don't really worry about the where the fat's coming from. It's usually still very high fat at each meal,
Mm, mm,
because I will I will cook the steak and I will add butter and lots of butter. I will maybe eat some butter straight out the fridge,
mm,
if I'm ever sort of inclined or
mm,
feeling
mm,
a little grumbly but not really hungry.
yeah.
I'll just have some butter and that'll all go away. I used to do that with coconut oil a lot, but I've recently found that coconut oil has some of the carbon bindings that are similar in the seed oil. So I'm
Right.
I'm moving a
Yes.
little bit away from that
Mm,
that uh,
mm, mm.
that type of fat, or that particular
Yes.
fat, I should say.
Yes, and
Um,
and 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 do you eat, like, beef dripping as well? Beef, I think they call it tallow over in the States. Do you eat that at all, or is it just mainly butter? And, actually, what about ghee? Do you eat ghee as
so
well?
I've never really done the ghee thing unless it's
Okay.
already incorporated.
Mm,
But I will have fat off something I've already cooked with.
yeah.
Now, it might not be beef tallow. For example, the other day I cooked up, I don't know, eight eight lamb chops,
Mm,
and quite a bit of fat comes out of those.
yeah.
I poured that into a container and kept that, and have been frying my eggs in that along with butter. So
Lovely.
it's just
Nice.
more and more fat, for me.
Yes,
It just
yes.
doesn't seem to hit the sides.
Yeah.
So
Brilliant. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Oh, and I've just got one other question about when you were training for that second Ironman when you were doing keto. Can I just ask, when it came to your carbs, were you counting net carbs or were you counting total carbs? I know you were saying you were keeping your carbs very low, like at 5%,
yes.
but was that 5% counted as net carbs or counted as total carbs?
So I was tracking both.
Right.
I had everything in a spreadsheet, and I was definitely weighing everything that I put in my mouth.
Yes.
Um, But what I was tracking was generally the total carbs, but I was making a note of total minus or total
Mm,
carbs minus the fiber.
minus the
So
fiber, yeah.
I have both, but I was trying to generally keep under around 50
Mm,
grams of total carbs a day.
yeah, brilliant, brilliant. Okay, so now we're going to dive a bit deeper into your fitness training, and I want to talk about that first Ironman that first Ironman you did, which was the New Zealand 2010
Correct?
Ironman that you did. So this is when you were still eating the more carb loading way as opposed to keto. Um, so just going back to that first Ironman. So did you pay attention to macros at that time, or was it just calories really that you were tracking?
Yeah, so for me in that first Ironman, it was more about I couldn't get enough food in
Right.
for the energy, and I was always hungry,
Mm,
and I would eat absolutely anything. So it was pizzas, chips, toasted sandwiches, anything and everything, lots of
mm,
pasta. I felt like I needed to eat this because that was a traditional way of fueling the body
mm,
and getting these carbohydrates in to try and keep me,
mm.
I guess, keep my energy up. But I found that I was forever hungry, and
Right.
it just, yeah, it just wasn't really working out. Some days I was doing
Mm,
10,000 calories, and I was trying to, burning 10,000 calories in exercise, and I was
right.
trying to supplement that with any and all sorts of food. I was drinking orange juice by the bucket load. I was drinking
Wow.
smoothies that were, much more carbohydrate based than
Mm,
fat based,
mm, mm.
and I just could not, yeah, get enough
No,
get
no.
enough
And,
food in.
and so just for the people watching and listening, because I'll be putting this onto a podcast as well as to my YouTube channel. So, so maybe there are some people who are not aware of how much energy you actually use when you're doing Ironman. So can you just let us have a sort of overview of the different segments of the Ironman race and how far you are running and cycling and that sort of thing? If you can just
Sure.
let us have a sort of
Yeah,
general idea of what's in store.
sure. So an Ironman triathlon is consisting of three events. The first is swimming, the second is cycling, and the third is running. They're all done continuously one after the other. There's no break. You can't,
Mhm.
do a bit of swimming on one day and do the cycling another day and running on the third day.
Mm,
It is a continuous race of those three activities. The swim, and I'm going to unfortunately talk in metric here, but the swim is 3.8 kilometers in length.
mhm,
The cycle is 180 kilometers in length, which I think equates to 112 miles of cycling. And that is followed by a marathon, which is 42.2 kilometers in length, or 20.
20, I think it's 26 miles, is
Thank
it? I
you.
think a
Thanks,
marathon.
Debbie.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yes.
26 miles run.
I think it's about. I mean, that is. I mean, I can't. What a feat of energy that must take.
Yeah. So it's
So
a
I
lot of
think because
activity all in one go. Absolutely.
all in one go. So I think because some people might have been surprised at how many calories you were using, because you just said you were using 10,000 calories. And so that's why I wanted you to just to explain quite how much energy is required for when you're doing one of these Ironman competitions. I mean, it's just incredible, really. So back then, you said that you were just eating anything that you could get your hands on because you simply couldn't, you couldn't satisfy your hunger when you were training for that first Ironman.
Correct.
And so how did you feel like physically? How did you feel? Because I know you mentioned before about the fact you maybe had some tummy problems.
Sure. So what I was noticing was that I was always hungry. So I was
Mm,
always trying to eat. So if I was going out on a long distance bike ride or run, I would have to take quite a lot of food with me. I was continually trying to eat it, but at the same time, you would get to a situation where your stomach would start, I guess, backing up almost and rejecting some of the food that was coming in
mhm.
because it was trying to, or my whole body was trying to do the activity, and there's not a lot of work that can be done
Mm,
for the stomach. So um, it became a problem. It
mm,
was difficult at times. I remember I went out on a maybe a 25-kilometer run,
mm.
and I found that I was chugging some gels and trying to eat some protein because I was just hungry, gurgling. It was all very
Oops.
annoying and problematic, and I found that I was sprinting in the end to a toilet because it was all going the wrong way
Oops.
for me. Yeah, so it was awful,
Sorry, I didn't
awful.
mean to
And then doing the Ironman itself, I was very stomach upset. I'm sure I was quite
laugh.
nervous,
Mm,
and it all compounded, and it made it for a very, very, yeah, rubbish sort of day, to be
mm,
honest.
mm.
Yeah,
Oh
not
dear.
fun.
Yeah, no, no, it doesn't sound like it at all.
Mm.
So just moving on in time then to your second Ironman, Melbourne 2015, and that was your first keto Ironman. Um, so you've said you've put a lot of focus into the foods that you were eating for that second Ironman. Can you just sort of contrast and compare the first Ironman with the
Sure.
second Ironman from a sort of maybe a gut health point of view or just a general how you were feeling?
Yeah. So again, it comes back to I had phenomenal energy,
Mm,
always, always loads of energy. I found I didn't need to continuously eat anything. I was obviously eating, but there was this very high fat approach. I would go out on a 6-hour bike ride, as an example, and I wouldn't take any food at all. I wouldn't bother. I
mm,
had loads of energy. I was doing the 6-hour bike ride, and I found that I was riding the distance of the Ironman, so 180 kilometers in the 6 hours. So I had plenty of energy, plenty in reserve, it seemed, and
mm,
same sort of scenario for the run. I was doing 30-kilometer runs, wouldn't take any food at all. I would just take
mm.
water with me,
Wow.
and I would just have water along the run, and
Mm,
it was complete contrast.
yeah.
And
Sounds like it. It sounds
yeah,
like it.
and
Yeah.
during the day, I would have a lot of energy. A lot of the time in the
Mm,
first Ironman, if I went out on a 6-hour bike ride, I'm eating all the time on the bike. I'd have bananas and muesli bars and all these types of things. And then I'd find I'd have to come home and sleep for a couple of hours. I was just
mm,
knackered. And
mm,
then that didn't seem to happen in the same type of way when I
mm.
was ketogenic and
Yeah.
full with fat and high on energy. It was
Mm.
amazing.
Yes, yes. So just looking at your macros for that second Ironman for the Melbourne one where you were keto. I know you've already said, that you were very, very high fat and only about sort of 10 to 15% of your dietary intake was in protein. And so you were really, really focused on the fat content there, weren't you?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah, good, good.
because I
And
I I just don't think I would have been in ketosis and maybe having the same energy highs, but
yeah,
I'm yet to perhaps confirm.
yeah.
So
So I just So how did you, because I know a lot of people will say, well, oh, that higher protein, you must have had like gut issues or something, something like that. The sort of negative people who are talking about sort of keto in a sort of negative way. Did you experience any issues with gut health or upset tummies when you were eating very the very high fat macros?
yeah, not that I can recall
No.
at all. If it was, it would have been perhaps the early days as I was transitioning
Yes.
into
Mm,
the ketogenic way of living. But I didn't
yes.
experience either this keto flu that people talk about.
Mm,
I'd already perhaps done some of the research. I knew that
mm,
I needed to increase um, my salt intake
okay.
and electrolytes. So I guess I was doing some of the things to prepare myself,
Yes.
and I didn't notice any
Yeah,
gut-related
yeah.
issues.
So funny enough, that was my next question, was the salt and the magnesium intake. So when you were going out on your, say, on your bike ride, or maybe when you were training, you were going for a run, did you consciously put salt into your water when you'd be going for your train one of your training
No, no,
sessions? No.
no.
So when
So
did you?
I would a little bit on the bike ride.
Yeah.
I'd make up my own sort of electrolyte type of drink.
Okay.
It would
That's
be
interesting. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah,
What you were doing?
it did have a little bit of dextrose in it
Okay.
and a lot of salt. So
Right.
really, it was just water, a little bit of dextrose, and a lot of salt, and that
Right.
was to be a bit of an electrolyte type of drink.
Yeah.
Um, and that was in a single bottle of water, but I
Mm,
would take 3 bottles with me. So I had just 2 straight water bottles and one that
right.
was a little bit electrolytic, let's
Brilliant.
say.
Yeah.
And then on the run, I would never have anything but water.
Water, just
Um,
water. Yeah.
and that's because I guess I was eating quite a bit of salt in my diet,
Yeah.
because that's what we need to do when
Mm,
we're
of
ketogenic.
course.
And so I was assuming that I was taking enough in, and that I could eat if I needed to when I
Okay.
got back. So
Okay. So basically, in one of your drinks, you had a little bit of, you had some salt and some dextrose, but generally, what you were doing as regards your salt intake was you were making sure that you added salt to all of your meals.
totally, yep,
Okay. Brilliant. Okay. So so when you were beginning training, the first couple of months that you were training, did you notice a reduction in your stamina at all? Because some people do say this when they're moving over to keto, in that sort of that first bit of their um, adaptation phase, they might find that their stamina is reduced slightly, or they maybe can't push themselves quite as much as they used to be able to. Did you find any of that?
yeah. So that's probably really interesting, and it's possible that I did, but the problem, or the scientific, I guess, type of answer is going to be that, to be honest, Debbie, because I only do an Ironman every 5 years, or that's sort of my sort of life way
Mm,
of working. I wasn't really doing much after the first Ironman, so I was pretty unfit. So
right.
I didn't suddenly say, "Oh gosh, this is really impacting me." I was starting off very slow again.
Okay.
So it was a good way to come into it, I guess. So
Mm,
I didn't feel like I'd been doing a whole lot of exercise and then suddenly had a little
mm,
slump.
mm,
Um, but I didn't really notice a whole lot. I'm very, I guess, positive mindset approach that this is going to work for me until it
mm,
doesn't work, and
mm.
it hasn't not worked. So
Right, brilliant, brilliant. So you mentioned in your notes that you sent over to me that you went to see a physio, and that was for some sore calf muscles
yes,
that you were having. So so what did he say to you? What advice maybe did he give to you? And how then after that, how were you dealing with any calf issues, that you calf muscle pains or aches, let's put it that way, that you were having? Was there anything that you were taking for that?
yeah.
Like in
So
supplements or,
got you.
anything like that?
Yeah. So effectively, I was going to see him because I've traditionally had a problem with calf injuries, and I tend to overdo things. I'm a bit of an overachiever, I guess, and as a result, I needed to strengthen more of my body because my calves were taking the brunt of things. So
Mm,
my glutes were a bit weak, and I needed to do some work on that front. But equally, it was important to increase my magnesium intake.
got you. Yeah.
and so that was a supplement that I started adding in. I also used a supplement of omega-3, just
Wow.
the fish oil side of things, and I upped things like salmon that I've already talked about.
Yeah.
So I try and do things as naturally as
Mm,
possible. But magnesium was probably a big one. And then later on, as training continues, uh, there you get to a point where cramps start creeping in,
mm.
and I was finding I needed to up the magnesium a little more again to help with those cramps as well as the salt that
Okay.
we've already talked
Yeah,
about.
brilliant. Can
Mm.
you remember what type of magnesium you were taking? Was it just one you would get from a supermarket, or was it a particular type of magnesium that you were having for those muscle cramps?
Yeah, so in general, it was a supermarket type of magnesium. I
Yeah.
would take additional as and when needed. But
Mm,
when I was struggling a bit more with some of the issues, I'd have a powdered magnesium that I would mix with water, um,
okay.
and that was
Yeah.
yeah, I can't recall the brand, I'm
Okay, I
afraid.
think I think magnesium malate is very good for the sort of muscle aches,
Okay,
but I think people sort of I think a lot of people don't appreciate the importance of magnesium and how important it is for so many of our bodily functions and
I
how
agree.
much better we can feel
Yeah,
when
sleep even.
we
Yeah.
are taking it regularly, exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
brilliant.
I did
Okay,
find it
good.
was quite helpful, and I must admit though, the whole ketogenic approach and impact it had on my muscles overall
Mm.
was vastly reduced uh, when compared with when I was a bit of a sugar carb
Ah,
burner.
that's interesting.
Yeah, you just don't seem to get the whole DOMS effect,
No.
the delayed
Mm,
onset
mm,
muscle soreness.
right.
So even if I would go out for a run now,
Mm,
every
mm,
day for 10 kilometers, I just don't
mm,
get sore. Uh,
right.
it's
Okay, good, good. So just talk us through that final week before the Melbourne Ironman. How were you feeling? How many hours were you training? And did you do any physio visits that week, or were you taking more supplements?
I don't think I upped the supplements, unless it was just a bit more on the magnesium front.
Mm,
Um, the amount of training in the final week before an Ironman drops
mm,
significantly.
right.
So you're in this stage called the tapering, and you taper off your training
Mm,
uh, with regards to you may just go for a half an hour run
right.
when you've perhaps been running for a couple of
Mm,
hours, in
mm.
the weeks leading up to that. And so going for a half an hour run just seems like it just seems like nothing, no
Yeah.
exercise whatsoever. And or you might just ride for 40 minutes or something like that.
Mm,
And I
mm.
followed quite a strict training plan as well.
Yeah.
Um, I'm pretty cognizant of following those things,
Mm,
to the letter almost. I'm very regimented in my approach.
yeah.
Um, but it was a significant drop in training volume. I was starting to get excited because I knew I was feeling really well, which was
Mm,
different perhaps to the New Zealand Ironman in 2010, where I was very apprehensive. Maybe it was
mm,
because it was my second one. There were many factors that I'm sure come into play.
yeah.
But I found I was ready and still continued to eat the same way. I didn't
Right.
drop the volume of food in any way.
Mm,
I didn't drop the macros any differently. I did eat um, a few carbohydrates on the day before. I had some baked potatoes, and
mm,
that was the first time I'd had any potato or type of carb, any sort of heavy carb, starchy type carb at
mm,
all
mm,
in those
mm.
6 months. And it was probably a bit of a nagging thing, what if I do need some carbohydrate tomorrow? You're almost second guessing yourself. And I, I sort of regret that in some regards, but
Mm.
to be honest, I think it was only about 150 grams
Yes, yes, I can see
carbohydrates.
from your notes it was
Right.
157. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So
Mm,
in the scheme of things, it wasn't the hundreds and hundreds of
no.
grams of carbs that people would generally be eating,
Mm.
and I still had a significant amount of fat.
Good, yeah, brilliant. And on the morning of the race, I know you'd mentioned in your notes that you had a smoothie.
Yeah.
So can you remember what you had? I'm just wondering if you like snuck in a few more carbs there, or if it was mainly fats.
It was pretty much fat.
Yeah,
I think I might have put half a banana
half a
or
banana. Yeah,
a portion of a banana in. Um, let me see if I can. I think I might have it here somewhere.
yeah.
Yeah, I've got it here. It was predominantly coconut cream based, again, with coconut oil, blueberries, chia seeds, a very small amount of banana, so like 15 grams, which would have been essentially a tablespoon, some raspberries, and
Mm,
a fair chunk of macadamia nuts. And I
brilliant.
blended all of that up. It is quite a thick smoothie. You can drink a bit of it, and then you've just got to spoon a whole bunch of it. But it is phenomenal because that's essentially all I had uh, for a significant part of that Ironman
Yeah.
day
Wow.
out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Good. So on the morning of the race, there you are, you're all set. So can you just talk us through that race, how you were feeling during that race compared to the first Ironman, the New Zealand Ironman in 2010? And did you notice any times in the race where maybe you felt sick or you hit that wall? They talk about hitting a wall, don't they? Or did you just feel that you didn't have the energy to finish, or how were you feeling?
Yeah. So I was feeling excited, ready. I felt like I'd prepared very well, and I was looking forward to the day. It was in Melbourne, which is our home city, so
Mm,
there was quite a few people that I knew was coming along, so that gave me a bit of a boost as well. Not that I didn't have friends and family around in New Zealand,
mm,
but it was just a
mm,
little more so again.
mm,
Um, but there was no time that I ever felt like my stomach was a problem.
mm.
I didn't eat any food until the third leg or maybe the last 40 kilometers, let's say, of the bike ride.
Right.
So I'd already covered 140 k's on the bike as well as the 3.8k swim. So I had nothing but the water on my bike
Mm, mm,
for any sort of anything I was putting in my body.
mm.
And then I grabbed a half a banana from a person at one of the aid stations on
Yes.
that last leg of the bike, and
Mm,
I wasn't sure if I needed to eat it. I didn't feel hungry, but again, I thought, well, what if I'm about to
mm,
start a marathon, in 40 kilometers time, after this final part of the bike, maybe I should eat half a banana. And so I did do that. I
mm,
started the marathon. That was quite strong. I was just cruising along, and then I'd read previously that some people had found that Coke had been a bit of a help for them, and so
mm,
I didn't want to reach for anything at the aid stations. The aid stations had all the gels, the protein bars, they had chips and
wow.
watermelon, and all different sort of lollies, I guess,
Mm,
like
mm,
snakes or jelly beans or something like that. And that's
wow.
all to try and help people boost up. But I had read that flat Coke can be quite helpful if you're feeling, I guess, a
Mm,
little on the turn. And I
mm,
grabbed maybe three very small cups, almost like shot glasses,
mm,
of Coke along the way on the run. And again, do I need it? Don't I need it? I wasn't sure,
mm,
but
mm.
it was getting quite warm as well. I think it was about 26, 28 degrees.
Wow.
So yeah,
So it's getting
but
warm, yeah.
on the whole, I had half a banana and maybe three cups of Coke,
Mm,
for the day. And other
amazing.
other friends would have been having gels every 15 minutes, every half an hour, maybe a bar. Some people take sandwiches on the
Yeah.
bike or things like that. And I just didn't
Mm.
need it.
No, fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And I think just tell us what they said to you as you crossed that finishing line? Because I just think this must have felt amazing.
Sure. So yeah, I ran to the finishing chute, and I'd found and saw the family on the right hand side. Went over and had a few hugs and cheers with them, and then you run across the finishing line, and they announced that John Tucker, you are an Ironman.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
that's
it's a great
amazing.
feeling. Yeah,
Wonderful. It must
yeah.
be. Yeah, wonderful. And I want you to confirm your timings with people because this is just when I read this in your notes, literally my jaw nearly hit the ground. So please compare your timings with your first Ironman in New Zealand to this Ironman that you did in 2015 in Melbourne. Please share with everybody your timings and also how much you'd knocked off your timings from that first Ironman.
Yeah, sure. So obviously we're talking a 5-year gap here and a
Yes.
5-year time horizon.
Mm,
So I ran the first Ironman in New Zealand in 2010. I was 40 years old, and 5 years later, obviously at 45, I
mm-hmm,
ran my next Ironman in Melbourne. The first Ironman took me quite some time. I really wasn't very well. The stomach issues, some of the other problems that I guess were creeping in, but a lot
mm,
was stomach based. I'd vomited maybe or 3 or 4 times. Just a tough experience.
mm,
It took me 14 hours and 24 minutes to complete that first Ironman. I was determined to complete it, but I was very far from happy
mm,
um, running across the same type of finish line.
yeah. Mm,
It was more about just get me out of here and get me into
mm,
bed. I was just feeling really rough.
yeah.
Contrasting that with 5 years later on a ketogenic approach and being a total fat adapted burner, as it were, I ran the second Ironman in 11 hours 58 minutes, which is approximately 2.5 hours faster.
2.5 hours. So 5 years older, but 2.5 hours faster. That
Yeah.
is what what did you think when you realized what your timings were?
Well,
What did you
yeah, I
think?
guess for starters, I couldn't believe I'd broken 12 hours, having done it in 14 and a half hours
Mm,
almost
mm,
the
mm,
first time. And I suspected I might be a little better because I was feeling amazing,
yeah.
but suddenly I've broken 12 hours, and I'm almost raring, to go. Uh, a little on the fatigued front, and my feet were pretty sore. I must admit, my toes had copped a bit of a bashing
Mm,
from the
mm,
marathon. But yeah, just energy wise, still I felt amazing, and
good.
it was just such an unexpected amount of time to have
Yeah.
to have
It's
finished.
just incredible, absolutely incredible. So, so once you'd had a chance to sort of look back at your timings and I mean, were you then sold on the idea that sort of keto and exercise is in fact a match made in heaven?
Totally, and I think
Right.
I was probably sold on that uh, maybe in the first couple of months of the training. It
Yeah.
was already transformational,
Mm,
and I just thought the day would be great. But as I said, a couple of niggling things perhaps crept in, and I don't think I'll take
mm,
any form of half a banana,
yeah.
as it were, on the next one. The
No.
the only thing I might do is I might take perhaps a uh, a gel pack almost of my own fat concoction, which might be made up of peanut butter and maybe coconut oil
Yeah.
or I've no idea. It really
Right.
depends. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
work that all out training
Yes.
wise.
Okay. So I just want to move now over to the mindset side of things. So I just want to talk quickly about the mindset side of things. So Did you notice that you had to change your mindset when you changed over to keto? And I know some people find it difficult to give up carbs. And what was your experience of giving up carbs? And did you find anything very hard to give up? So I know for me, when I gave up carbs, like bread was incredibly hard for me to give up. Although in actual fact, when I gave it up, the whole gut issues seemed to get so much better. But I
Yeah, it's
think we
funny
just
what you
seem to
cling on to, isn't
it's
it? Yeah.
it is, yes, quite, yes. So, how
Yeah.
did you find that change of mindset?
Well, I guess I had talked about it for a month leading up to before I'd started
Mm,
and started doing this low carb approach.
mm,
And I'm quite good in being very disciplined. It's probably quite evident from this conversation in that I just had said to myself, okay, I'm gonna take this approach
mm,
until it
mm,
doesn't work. But did I miss things? Absolutely. Um, Chips. Was a bit of a chip fan. I used to
yeah,
love to go and grab a bag of chips or a serving of chips and just plow through those, not realizing and looking back now how bloated
mm,
that used to make me feel, even though at the time you think you're enjoying it. But
mm,
ice cream was another one. And
ah,
because I really, really am a huge fan of ice cream,
mm,
I've I've specifically gone out and worked out either how I can make my own, which I
mm,
did throughout the Ironman training, so that I
right,
knew again exactly what I'd put in so I could weigh everything rather than
yes,
rely on some food label. But I've also found a company in Australia that makes very low carb ice cream and it's super high
mm,
fat. And it's called, and I really like the name, it's called Donata, as in it's nothing in Spanish,
ah,
because there's just no sugar. And it is a
that's
great
brilliant,
tasting ice cream and super high in fat. So, yeah.
brilliant.
So I
Okay,
still get to get
so
that hit, as it were,
yeah,
but I'm not eating it from a rubbish perspective. And
yes,
so I, yeah, I found I missed some things at times. And if I'd had perhaps a really good training day, I
mm,
would have eaten nothing but fat, and then
mm,
maybe I'd go out to the pictures with my wife or with my family and friends, and I'd have an ice cream.
right,
But I knew
yeah,
exactly how many grams of carbohydrates were in that ice
yeah,
cream, and I
mm,
just didn't have any other grams at all that
no,
day.
no,
And so it was roughly about 30 grams of
no,
carbohydrates.
yeah,
So I knew that's what I was going to eat. And it was a little
brilliant.
treat, but it was still
Okay.
high in fat.
Yeah,
So,
good, good. Okay, yeah, because I do think that the mindset side of things is so important, and I think it's what a lot of people struggle with. I think because we've got food addictions, or we just maybe find it to begin with almost incomprehensible, this moving away from how we've been eating, for the last sort of 50 or 60 years,
no,
and
well, my
the food
friends,
that's
during this period would say to me, you're going to get fat, you're going to get
mm,
ill. This is really not the right approach,
mm,
and you're going to pay for it almost. And I was very adamant to try and not listen to any of the naysayers,
right,
because you're
mm,
absolutely right, Debbie. They're out there. There's this message of fat makes you fat, and
mm,
I just can't say it enough to people that I meet even now that just look at me. How is fat
mm.
making me fat? I'm super lean
Yes,
and very healthy.
yeah.
It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, but because if fat did make you fat, then that week before you were still eating high fat, but you weren't exercising as much. If fat did make you fat, you would have put on a whole load of weight
Sure.
during that week on the run up to the second Ironman. And did you
Yeah.
put weight on?
No, no,
No.
didn't put any weight on at
Yeah.
all. And
Mm,
in fact, I don't think I've put on weight almost for this 10 years.
mm,
It's
yeah.
it's very
Cool.
steady, very flat,
Yeah.
and
Mm,
there are times when I don't do any exercise, and I don't put any weight on.
no. No.
If anything, I probably lose a little bit of muscle, which brings
Mm,
my overall weight down a little. But I am
yeah.
not putting on
No.
fat.
No.
It's yeah.
Brilliant. So, last few questions because I know we need to start wrapping up now. So
Sure,
I just
sure.
want to squeeze in some last few questions. So um, sort of like more general questions, really. So is Australia happy to embrace keto lifestyle, or are they still reluctant to move away from carbohydrates?
I think from a general population perspective, it's still very carb centric, a
Mm,
bit like most Western diets.
mm,
It's bread, pasta, um, rice sort of based approach. So
mm, mm,
you would have or you would have protein and fat with already a substantial amount of carbohydrates.
mm.
But
Right.
there are obviously people that recognize this way of eating, perhaps just like everywhere else in the world,
Mm,
and that's some groups that I enjoy, either spending time with or having great conversations with.
yeah. Good. Yes. And so, what do you think are the most important points when approaching the mindset side of training? So maybe looking at from a point of view of the sort of prep work or the training, or what do you think are the most important points?
Well, certainly from a training perspective, the way I approach things is to prepare in advance. So to know my training plan, perhaps for the entire
Yeah.
week. I get my gear organized the night
Mm,
before a training session the next day,
mm,
uh, and prepare any food that I might be eating, and
mm.
or just have my drink ready. Just try and get ahead of what you need to do, and then
Right.
look after the body, of course,
Yeah.
because it's going to take a bit of a battering,
Mm,
certainly if you're going through an
mm,
Ironman.
mm. And so, if somebody is watching or listening to this and they're currently into their fitness, they're running, maybe they're already doing a triathlon or even an Ironman, and they want to change their approach to a more keto-based approach, what advice would you give them to start off with? How would they be best making the changes to move over to a keto lifestyle? And how much of a lead-in time would they need before going to do the next competition, whatever it might be?
Sure. So I gave myself 1 month before I started my actual training plan to
Right.
start to transition into the
Mm,
ketogenic lifestyle by
mm,
going very low carb. And I
mm,
would say to people, recognize what you're putting in your mouth, try and understand what it's comprised of, and if you're not reading labels already on things that you might be purchasing,
mm.
or to be honest, if you're eating anything that's packaged, it's time to give that a miss.
Yeah.
You need to eat some form of real food,
Mm,
be that, and I guess was quite dairy heavy because you can
mm,
get a significant amount of fat from dairy. But for
mm.
people that might not work for, then this whole carnivore type of approach
Yeah.
would help. And eating vegetables, for some people, it's okay. For some people, they might want to cut that right out.
Mm,
But for me, it's still very healthy because it is real food.
mm,
Um, when I'm thinking from a carnivore perspective, I wouldn't be doing that. But I would be reducing all of the rubbish, specifically sugar and highly processed carbohydrates.
yeah.
And if you can, drop as many carbs as possible and transition to a fat burner by upping your fat intake.
Yeah. Mm,
It won't have an effect on your body composition, and in fact, it'll probably be the opposite.
yeah. And so when you're thinking about moving over, when you're thinking about your next Ironman, do you think you might do that carnivore?
I haven't really decided yet, Debbie, and it's a great question. And
Mm,
I was, or my plan, sort of life type plan, is to do an Ironman every 5 years.
mm,
Unfortunately, the last Ironman I was meant to do was in 2020, which was
mm.
also during the pandemic. So it's a problem. Uh, And as such, I've just been or just been keeping fit, not trying really, just been keeping fit,
Yes.
and still continuing to eat this way. But as I said, I'm starting to approach the carnivore side of things, and that's probably because I'm getting a little older and
Mm,
realizing that protein is going to become an important part of my
absolutely.
overall makeup
Mm,
requirements. And
yes.
so if I weren't to go or to do the next Ironman, which will be in 2025, if I weren't to do that fully and solely carnivore, it
Mm,
would still be more protein and again,
right.
still very high fat.
Yes, yes.
So
So just thinking about the macros that what you had 10 to 15% protein when did your last Ironman and you were about 75% fat. So what do you think you might up your protein to?
yeah, so I guess if I was thinking about it traditionally again from a ketogenic perspective, I
Mm,
would be around the 75% or above to
mm, mm,
80%
mm.
fat, and then it would be just a straight 25 or 20%
Yeah,
protein.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And it'd be
Brilliant.
no carbohydrates.
No carbohydrates. Yeah,
Yeah.
brilliant. Good.
Yeah.
So I think we will draw it a close there. So John, thank you so much for agreeing to come on to my channel to talk about your experiences with keto and Ironman. And it's been amazing to hear about how you've made that transition onto keto and then doing the Ironman and knowing what you had to the running and the swimming and the cycling, just incredible. And your experiences with having so much energy, and then completing that second Ironman 2.5 hours faster than you completed the first one when you were very high carb on the first one. And it just really goes to show how we don't need a lot of carbohydrates in order to do such a lot of heavy, the running and the cycling and that sort of thing, and that the higher fat and the protein is just the very, very best way to fuel the body. So
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you so much for coming onto my channel. So take care and hope to see you soon. Take
Thanks,
care.
Debbie. That was really terrific. I appreciated every minute of it. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you.